I was standing on the Jackson Station platform, holding Miles close to me, when I heard a familiar voice call my name. Amora. Amora Hayes, is that you? I turned around and froze. It was my father, Vernon. I hadn't seen him in almost 2 months, constantly coming up with excuses why I couldn't visit. I'd cut our phone calls short, citing tiredness and being too busy. Now he was standing right in front of me, and by the look on his face, I knew he saw everything. Welcome to Betty Stories. I share new life stories here every day, and I'd really appreciate it if you hit subscribe and liked my video. Now let's jump back into my story. I'm sure you'll love it if you keep listening till the end. He saw my worn-out puffer coat with the pocket that had ripped open, the cheap boots with the thin soles I'd bought off the internet, Miles in a snowsuit that was clearly too small for him, my own gaunt face, the dark circles under my eyes, and my hands trembling from exhaustion and fear. Dad, I managed, attempting a smile, but my lips betrayed me and just started shaking. Why are you at the subway station? My father asked, walking closer, his eyes scanning me with deep concern. What about your car? I bought you that new Kia last year for your birthday. What happened to it? I sold it. I looked away. I needed the cash. For what? My father's voice tightened. Amora, what is going on? You look like you've been run ragged. Why aren't you answering my calls? And where is Donnell? I felt the tears start to well up. For 2 months, I had held it together. 2 months of silence, fear, complying with every demand, handing over money, enduring the insults, and living in constant dread. Now, looking into my father's eyes, I knew I couldn't do it anymore. Dad, let's go somewhere private, I whispered. We walked into the Corner Bistro, a coffee shop near the station. My father sat Miles down at a table, ordered him an apple juice and a big cookie, then sat opposite me and took my hand. Tell me, he said, all of it. And I told him everything. I told him how after Miles was born, my mother-in-law, Loretta Jenkins, started visiting more and more often. How at first it was caring advice, then it turned into demands and finally ultimatums. I explained how she found out that the 2-bedroom condo downtown, my grandmother's legacy, was fully in my name, and how she started demanding I sign the property over to Miles for his future. I had refused. My voice shook as I told him I'd explained it was my grandmother's inheritance, and I wanted to manage my own property. And that's when it all started, I finished. My father listened in silence, only tightening his grip on my hand. A week after I refused, you got jumped. I looked up at him. Remember near your house that evening? You said it was just random vandalism. I remember. My father's face went stone cold. It wasn't random. The very next day, Loretta Jenkins came to my place. She sat in the armchair, sipped her tea, and said, "How's your daddy doing? Heard he got roughed up. You know, things happen these days, especially to older folks. Next time it could be worse. Much worse." She was smiling when she said it. My father went pale. I watched the muscles in his jaw clench, but he remained silent, letting me get it all out. I was scared, terrified, but I still refused to sign. Then Donnell showed me a video. I continued. It's me supposedly screaming at Miles, shaking him, saying awful things. It's edited, Dad. They cut pieces from different moments, spliced them together, and removed the context, but it looks terrifying. They said they would send it to Child Protective Services if I didn't sign the papers, that they would take Miles and prove I'm a bad mother. Those monsters, my father said aloud, the first time he'd spoken the rage that was boiling inside him. That's not all. I wiped away tears. Loretta used some contacts to get copies of my corporate documents and financial reports from my job, and she forged them. She made it look like I was stealing money from the company. The numbers are changed. The signatures are faked. It all looks exactly like me. She said if I didn't comply, she'd send those documents to my boss and the police. I would be locked up and Miles would be gone. My father closed his eyes, taking a deep breath. Keep going. They demand my entire paycheck. Every last dime. Donnell takes my bank card the day I get paid, pulls everything out, and hands it over to his mother. They leave Miles and me just $75 a week for food, transit, daycare, everything. I stopped buying new clothes for myself. I wear what I have. I get Miles's clothes from cheap online outlets. Sometimes I borrow money from co-workers just to eat and feed my son. The car, they forced me to sell it too. They told me to sell it and give them the cash. I sold it for $8,000 even though it was worth $12,000. Loretta Jenkins took all of it. She said it was the first installment for their silence. Where is Donnell in all this? My father's voice was icy. He's completely on his mother's side. He says I should be grateful they haven't taken Miles and that I need to listen or it'll be worse. He controls my phone and reads my messages. They strictly forbade me from telling anyone, especially you and Mom. They said if they found out I complained, next time you wouldn't just be assaulted. Loretta's brother, Preston, did time years ago. It was his people who jumped you. She told me straight out he can fix any problem. I covered my face with my hands. Everything I'd bottled up for 2 months poured out. The fear, the humiliation, the helplessness. I cried while my father gently stroked my arm, waiting for me to calm down. They still want the condo, I continued. They are pushing me to sign it over to Donnell, and he'll pass it to his mother. They say it's only fair, because I'm living with their son, that my grandmother's condo should be family property. I keep refusing, but they are pressing harder. Last week, Loretta's brother's people just happened to be standing outside Miles's daycare, just standing there watching. It was a warning. They told me next time they'd walk right inside. Why didn't you tell me? My father gripped my hands tightly. Why didn't you tell me right away? I was scared, Dad. They hurt you once. I couldn't risk them doing it again, or worse, hurting Mom or taking Miles. They have those forged documents, that video. They have people who won't stop at anything. I'm trapped. I don't know what to do. My father stood up, walked to the window, and stood in silence, looking out at the street. Miles was peacefully eating his cookie, not understanding a word. I stared at my father's back and felt that telling the story hadn't brought relief. The fear had only intensified. What now? What happens when Loretta Jenkins finds out I told him? My father returned to the table, sat down, and looked at me. In his eyes, I saw something unfamiliar, something cold, hard, and professional. Amora, he said calmly. There are some things you don't know about me. What do you mean? You know I served 20 years in the army, but you don't know where exactly. I frowned. My father had never talked about the details of his service. He only said he served, retired, and started working as a security consultant. I was in special operations. Army intelligence. 20 years of operational work, surveillance, recruitment, threat analysis, neutralizing targets. I know how to collect information people hide. I know how to find weak spots. I know how to plan operations so that the target doesn't even realize they've been trapped until it's too late. I stared at my father with my mouth open. Special operations. Army intelligence. My father, who had always seemed like an ordinary, quiet man. I didn't quit that line of work after retirement, he continued. I consult on security matters. I have connections in law enforcement, in the agencies. I have people who will help if I ask, and I have skills that you don't forget. Dad, I don't understand. You will now. He leaned closer. Your mother-in-law and her ex-con brother think they're the smartest people in the room. They think they can blackmail, threaten, and intimidate. They chose the wrong family. They touched my daughter and my grandson. That was their biggest mistake. There was steel in his voice. I suddenly understood that the person sitting across from me wasn't just my father. This was a man who knew how to fight, truly fight, not with fists, but with intellect, connections, and experience. What are you going to do? I'm going to solve this problem so they never dare to think about you or Miles again. So that all their threats turn against them. But for that, I need time. And I need your help. What kind of help? You need to act completely normal. Keep handing over the money. Keep enduring the abuse. Don't show that you told me. You must not change your behavior at all. This is critical. They must be convinced you are broken, that you'll stay silent and obey. Do you understand? I nodded, though my insides were twisting with terror. How long? A few weeks, maybe a month. I need to gather intel, prepare the evidence, and plan every detail. We can't rush this. If we mess up, they'll destroy all the evidence and disappear. We have to act precisely, with no room for error. And if they find out I told you, they won't. We won't meet again. And we won't talk on the phone. We'll communicate through a secure messenger I'm going to install for you. The messages will delete automatically. There will be no trace on your phone. Donnell won't find a thing, even if he checks. Dad, I'm scared. I know. But you have to trust me. I won't let anyone hurt you. No one will touch you, Miles, or your mother. I promise. I've handled bigger things than some greedy mother-in-law and her criminal brother. Just hold on a little longer. Can you do that? I looked at Miles, who was smiling at me, his face smeared with cookie icing. I looked back at my father, whose eyes held absolute certainty, and I nodded. I can. Good girl. Now, listen carefully. My father took out his phone, installed an app for me, explained how to use it, and taught me how to wipe the logs. He gave me a few pointers on how to handle Loretta and Donnell. The main thing is not to show that anything has changed. You are a broken, scared woman who's ready to do anything to protect her child. That's who you have to appear to be. But inside, remember this is a game, a temporary game. It will be over soon. We walked out of the coffee shop. My father hugged me and kissed Miles on the top of his head. Hold tight, sweetie. I'm right here, even if you can't see me. I walked back toward the subway, holding my son's hand. And for the first time in 2 months, I felt not just fear, but hope. That same evening, sitting in the kitchen of his own condo, my father took out an old notebook and started writing down names, connections, and organizational charts. The plan for the operation was coming together in his head like a puzzle. 20 years in intelligence had taught him to see the full picture. Loretta Jenkins, 60 years old. Brother Preston, 58 years old, 2 convictions for robbery and extortion. Released 3 years ago. Criminal ties maintained, likely organized the assault. Donnell Jenkins, 35 years old, weak-willed mama's boy, fully under his mother's control. High chance of recruitment if pressured correctly. Amora's forged work documents. Need forensic analysis. Proof of forgery. The video with the child. Also forensics. Confirm the montage. My father picked up his phone and dialed a number. Solomon, it's Vernon. Yeah, it's been a minute. Listen, I need help. Small, unofficial operation. Surveillance, recording, tech support. Can you do it? Excellent. We'll meet tomorrow and I'll give you the details. He hung up, dialed the next number, then another. By midnight, he had a team of 4 people, all former colleagues from his service days, all vetted, all ready to help unofficially. The work started the next day. Solomon, the former tech specialist, installed bugs in Loretta Jenkins's condo. It took 2 days of observation to figure out her schedule and 15 minutes of work while she was out shopping. The microphones were so small they couldn't be detected without specialized equipment. They transmitted sound to a recorder in the neighboring apartment, which my father was able to rent through a real estate contact. Andre, a former operative, began surveillance on Preston. Photos, video recordings, meetings. He needed to document all of Preston's movements and contacts. Within a week, a thick folder of material was sitting on Vernon's desk. Owen, now working for a private forensic firm, took on the analysis of the documents and the video. He dissected the fake financial reports in 2 days. Signatures were clearly forged and the numbers were altered using a graphic editor. The signs of editing were obvious to an expert. The video with Miles was a classic montage. Clips were cut from different moments and spliced together. Owen wrote an official finding that could be used in court. Malcolm, whose police connections were especially useful, started gathering information on Preston's criminal past, convictions, contacts, current activities. It turned out Preston hadn't shed his old habits. He was implicated in several new extortion cases. But the evidence was thin. Vernon coordinated it all, analyzing the data and building the plan. After 2 weeks, he had the full picture. Loretta Jenkins met regularly with her brother. Their conversations, caught by the bugs, were damning. She openly discussed how to pressure Amora, how to force her to sign the condo over, and how to use the threats. Preston suggested ramping up the pressure, organizing another assault so that little fool finally gets it. They laughed at Amora, called her a pushover, and discussed how they would split the cash from the condo sale. Vernon listened to these recordings, feeling a cold fury rise within him, but he kept his emotions in check. Emotions are the enemy of operational work. Cold calculation is required. The plan was divided into 4 phases. Phase 1. The marked money. Vernon used his old intelligence contacts to get access to specially marked bills. They were regular banknotes, but their serial numbers were logged in a database. If these bills were found on someone during a search, it would be direct evidence of a link. Amora was to hand over her next paycheck using this money. Loretta would take it, pass some to her brother, and then it would be a matter of technique, an anonymous tip to the police about Preston's extortion activities. A search warrant. That, and he does it without question. He's useful, but he's too weak to run things on his own. Preston's laugh. At least he brings in the money. Long as he keeps delivering, we keep him around. Donnell's face crumpled as he heard his own mother's words. His hands shook on the table. She said that about me? Keep listening, Vernon said coldly. The next recording was from just 2 days earlier. Loretta Jenkins on the phone with Preston. If that fool Donnell ever gets a backbone and turns on us, we'll make sure he goes down too. I've got enough on him to put him away for years. He doesn't even know it. Donnell stared at the tablet, his mouth hanging open. I'm her son, he whispered. You're her tool, Vernon corrected. There's a difference. She's been using you to get to Amora, to get to the money, to get to the condo. You're disposable to her. The moment you stop being useful, she'll throw you away without a second thought. Donnell buried his face in his hands. For a long moment, he said nothing. Then, in a broken voice, what do you want from me? I want you to help me bring her down. Donnell looked up, eyes wide. She's my mother. She's a criminal who has been destroying your wife, threatening your child, and using you as her personal ATM. And from the sound of it, she's perfectly willing to let you take the fall if things go wrong. Is that the mother you want to protect? Donnell's jaw worked silently. Finally, he said, if I help you, what happens to me? You cooperate fully, you give testimony, you provide access to her communications, and you walk away with no charges. You and Amora can figure out your marriage later, but right now, you have a chance to do the right thing. For your son. Donnell looked down at the table. When he looked up again, there were tears in his eyes. Okay, he said quietly. Okay. I'll help. Phase 3 was complete. Over the next week, Donnell proved invaluable. He copied incriminating messages from his mother's phone. He confirmed details of the extortion scheme. He even provided a recording of his mother explicitly discussing how they would dispose of the forged documents once the condo was signed over. The evidence pile grew. Preston remained in custody, held on the firearm and drug charges while the extortion investigation continued. His lawyer advised him to stay silent, but Preston was growing desperate. Meanwhile, Loretta Jenkins grew increasingly paranoid. She called Donnell constantly, demanding updates, accusing Amora of betrayal, threatening to handle things herself if necessary. Every call was recorded. Every threat was documented. Finally, the moment arrived. Amora, following instructions, told Donnell to inform his mother that she was ready to sign. She was tired of fighting. She just wanted it to be over. Loretta Jenkins practically purred with satisfaction. Finally. I knew she'd break. Set it up for Thursday at 10 a.m. I'll have my lawyer draw up the papers. Thursday morning, Amora dressed carefully. Simple clothes, no makeup, the look of a defeated woman surrendering to circumstance. Miles was safely with a neighbor, one of Vernon's trusted contacts. Donnell drove her to the lawyer's office. His hands were white-knuckled on the steering wheel. You okay? Amora asked quietly. No, he admitted. But I'm doing this. For Miles. She nodded. It wasn't forgiveness, but it was a start. The lawyer's office was in a modest building downtown. Loretta Jenkins was already there, sitting in the conference room with a smug smile, a manila envelope on the table before her. Two large men stood by the door, Preston's associates. Muscle. Amora and Donnell sat across from her. The lawyer, a nervous man named Harrison who clearly had done business with Loretta before, shuffled papers. "We're here to execute the transfer of property," he began. Amora Hayes agrees to sign over the downtown condo to Donnell Jenkins, who will then transfer it to me, Loretta interrupted smoothly. "Let's not waste time with unnecessary steps. Donnell, you remember what we discussed?" Donnell said nothing. Loretta frowned at him, then turned to Amora. "Sign the papers. Now." Amora picked up the pen. She looked at the document, then at Loretta. For a moment, their eyes met. Loretta's were cold, triumphant. Amora's were unreadable. Then Amora put the pen down. "No." Loretta's smile froze. "What did you say?" "I said no." Amora's voice was steady. Strong. Nothing like the broken woman of the past months. "I'm not signing anything." Loretta's face darkened. "You little fool. Do you really think you have a choice? I have those documents. I have that video. One phone call and you lose your job, your son, everything. Make the call." Loretta stared at her. Then she laughed, an ugly, harsh sound. "You're bluffing." "Am I?" Behind Loretta, the conference room door opened. Two men in suits entered, badges displayed. "Loretta Jenkins?" One said. "You're under arrest for extortion, blackmail, and conspiracy to commit fraud." Loretta spun around, her face a mask of shock and rage. "What is this? Harrison, what is this?" The lawyer had gone pale and was backing away. The two muscle men looked uncertain, then noticed more officers in the hallway. They raised their hands. "We're just hired help," one muttered. "We don't know anything." Loretta Jenkins was handcuffed, still protesting, still screaming threats. As they led her past Amora, she spat, "You'll regret this." "My brother will." "Your brother is already in custody," Amora said quietly. "And he's not getting out. Not this time." Loretta was dragged away. Donnell sat frozen, staring at the table. The officer in charge approached Amora. "Ms. Hayes? We'll need your statement, but there's no rush. We have all the evidence we need." Amora nodded. Her legs felt weak. It was over. It was really over. Outside the building, Vernon waited. When Amora walked out, he opened his arms, and she fell into them, sobbing. Not from sadness, but from release. From the sheer overwhelming relief of it being finished. "It's okay," he murmured, holding her tight. "It's over. You're safe. Miles is safe. It's over." Later, much later, after statements were given and lawyers were consulted and the long process of justice began its slow march, Amora sat in her father's living room. Miles was asleep on the couch, wrapped in a blanket. Donnell was somewhere else, dealing with his own consequences, his own choices. Amora didn't know if they would make it as a couple. That was a question for another day. For now, she was free. "How did you know?" she asked her father. "How did you know the plan would work?" Vernon sipped his coffee, considering the question. "I didn't. Not for sure. But I knew that people like Loretta Jenkins, they make one fatal mistake. They underestimate their victims. They think fear will last forever. They think they're the only ones playing the game." He set down his cup. "They forget that love is a hell of a motivator too. And love, when it's backed by skill and patience and a little bit of old-fashioned military training, well, love wins. Every time." Amora leaned her head on his shoulder. "Thank you, Dad." "Don't thank me. You're the one who survived. You're the one who held on. I just provided the opening." They sat in silence, father and daughter, watching Miles sleep. The nightmare was over. And in its place, something new was beginning. Something that looked a lot like hope. The words exactly as she had rehearsed, her voice trembling with genuine fear that needed no acting. Donnell stared at her for a long moment. Something flickered in his eyes, guilt, perhaps, or shame, but he quickly looked away. I'll tell Mom. The next day, Loretta Jenkins arrived at the apartment within hours of hearing the news. She swept through the door like she already owned the place, her eyes gleaming with triumph. Well, well. The prodigal daughter-in-law finally sees reason. She settled herself on the couch, not bothering to remove her coat. I knew you'd come around eventually. They always do. Amora stood in the kitchen doorway, arms wrapped around herself. She didn't speak. She didn't need to. Day after tomorrow, Loretta announced. 10 a.m. I've already spoken to Harrison. He'll have the papers ready. You'll sign, Donnell will sign, and then this whole unpleasant business will be behind us. What about the video? Amora asked quietly. The documents from my work. Loretta waved a hand dismissively. All destroyed, of course. Once the transfer is complete, you'll never hear from us again. You have my word. Amora almost laughed. The word of a woman who had spent months terrorizing her. But she just nodded, eyes downcast. Okay. Loretta stood, smoothing her coat. Good. I'll see you Thursday, then. Don't be late. She paused at the door, turning back with a smile that didn't reach her eyes. Oh, and Amora? Don't think about trying anything stupid. I've got people everywhere. You understand? I understand. The door closed. Amora leaned against the kitchen counter, her heart pounding. 2 more days. That night, a message arrived from Vernon. Preston denied bail. He's staying locked up. The detective has the warrant ready. Harrison is cooperating fully, he's terrified of being implicated, so he'll do exactly what we need. Tomorrow, you play your part. Then it's over. Amora read the message 3 times, then watched it disappear. She slept fitfully that night, dreams full of running, of chasing, of Miles being pulled from her arms. But when she woke, the sun was shining through the thin curtains, and she heard Miles babbling happily in his crib. One more day. Thursday morning dawned cold and grey. Amora dressed carefully in the same worn clothes she'd worn for months, the costume of a broken woman. She fed Miles, packed a small bag for him, and at 8:30, a knock came at the door. It was her father's contact, a woman named Cheryl who introduced herself as a friend of your dad's. She had kind eyes and a no-nonsense manner. I'll take Miles to the park, then to my place. He'll have pancakes and cartoons. He won't even notice you're gone. Amora hugged her son tightly, breathing in the sweet smell of his hair. Mommy will be back soon, baby. Be good for Cheryl. Miles waved happily as Cheryl carried him down the hall. Amora watched them go, then closed the door and leaned against it, gathering herself. Donnell emerged from the bedroom, dressed but haggard. They looked at each other across the small living room, 2 people who had once loved each other, now strangers connected only by trauma and a child. You ready? He asked. No. But I'm doing it anyway. He nodded, not meeting her eyes. They left together, walking to the subway in silence. The lawyer's office was in a modest building near the courthouse. Harrison met them at the door, his face pale and sweaty despite the cool weather. He ushered them into the conference room where the papers were already laid out on the table. Ms. Jenkins called ahead, he said, avoiding Amora's gaze. She should be here any moment. Amora's Saturday. Donnell stood by the window, staring out at the street. The minutes crawled by. At precisely 10 o'clock, Loretta Jenkins swept into the room. Behind her came 2 men, not the usual muscle, but different ones. Harder faces. Cold eyes. Preston's. Connections, probably, borrowed for the occasion. Everyone's here. Good. Loretta took her seat at the head of the table, gesturing imperiously. Harrison, the papers. The lawyer slid the documents toward Amora. This is the quitclaim deed transferring ownership of the property located at. I know what it is, Amora interrupted. Her voice was steady, surprising herself. Loretta's eyes narrowed slightly, but she said nothing. Harrison cleared his throat. Ms. Hayes, if you'll sign here, and initial here. Amora picked up the pen. The room was silent. Loretta leaned forward slightly, anticipation written on her face. Amora looked at the paper. Then she looked up at Loretta. No. The word hung in the air like a gunshot. Loretta's smile faltered. What? I said no. Amora set the pen down carefully. I'm not signing anything. For a moment, Loretta seemed genuinely confused. Then her face darkened with rage. Do you think this is a game? Do you think you can waste my time? She snapped her fingers at the two men. They stepped forward. And then the conference room door burst open. Nobody move. The detective entered first, badge displayed, followed by 4 uniformed officers. They spread through the room quickly, efficiently. The 2 thugs raised their hands immediately. They'd been through this before. Loretta Jenkins shot to her feet, her chair scraping loudly. What is the meaning of this? Harrison, call my lawyer. Loretta Jenkins, you're under arrest for extortion, blackmail, conspiracy to commit fraud, and criminal threats. The detective's voice was calm, professional. You have the right to remain silent. As the handcuffs clicked around her wrists, Loretta's eyes found Amora. For the first time, Amora saw something other than triumph or contempt in those eyes. She saw fear. And confusion. How? Loretta whispered. How did you? Amora stood, straightening her worn coat. You made one mistake. You thought I was alone. You thought I had no one. She looked toward the doorway, where Vernon had just appeared, leaning on a cane he didn't really need. His eyes met hers, and he nodded slightly. I have my father, Amora finished quietly. And he has friends you don't want to meet. Loretta Jenkins was led away in handcuffs, still protesting, still threatening. The 2 thugs followed in separate sets of cuffs. Harrison the lawyer was already on his phone, frantically calling his own attorney. Donnell stood frozen by the window, watching it all. When an officer approached him, he nodded tiredly. I'll cooperate. I have testimony. Amora walked past him without a word. She had nothing left to say to him. Not yet. Maybe not ever. Outside, the cold air hit her face like a blessing. Vernon wrapped an arm around her shoulders, and for a long moment, they just stood there, watching the police cars pull away. It's over, she whispered. It's over, he agreed. She thought about the months of fear, the hunger, the cold, the constant dread. She thought about the car she'd sold, the money she'd handed over, the nights she'd lain awake wondering if she'd ever be free. And then she thought about Miles, probably covered in pancake syrup by now, laughing at cartoons, completely unaware that his world had just been rebuilt. I want to go get my son, she said. Vernon smiled, a real smile, warm and proud. Let's go get your son. They walked toward the subway together, father and daughter. The clouds were breaking overhead, letting thin winter sunlight through. Amora Hayes took a deep breath, and for the first time in months, it didn't hurt to breathe. The nightmare was over. And she had survived. We're doing so well. Just finish the signatures, and all of this will be behind you. No more stress, no more worries. You can go home to your little boy and forget any of this ever happened. Amora looked at the paper. Her hand still trembled over the 3rd signature line. She could feel Solomon's eyes on her, heavy as stones. She could feel Loretta's impatience radiating like heat. And somewhere, just outside, she knew her father was waiting. I can't, she whispered. Loretta's face contorted. You can't? What do you mean you can't? You gave your word. We had an agreement. I never agreed to anything, Amora said, louder now. Her voice was strengthening. You threatened me. You threatened my father. You sent people to hurt him. You forged documents. You made a fake video. You took every penny I earned for months. Loretta's eyes went wide with fury. You shut your mouth. No. Amora stood up, knocking her chair back. I'm done shutting up. I'm done being afraid. I'm done letting you control my life. Solomon moved toward her. Donnell stepped between them. Don't, Donnell said quietly. Solomon sneered. Get out of the way, boy. Don't touch my wife. For a moment, everyone froze. Loretta stared at her son as if he'd grown a second head. Donnell? What are you doing? I'm done too, Mom. His voice cracked, but he didn't back down. I'm done lying for you. I'm done helping you destroy my family. I've got recordings. Texts. Everything. It's over. Loretta's face went pale, then red. You little traitor. After everything I did for you, everything you did for me? Donnell laughed bitterly. You used me. You laughed at me behind my back. You called me a doormat. I heard the recordings. Solomon grabbed Donnell by the collar. The door burst open. Police. Nobody move. Officers flooded the room. Solomon released Donnell immediately, hands going up. Loretta Jenkins stood frozen, her mouth open, her eyes darting around like a trapped animal. The detective stepped forward. Loretta Jenkins, you're under arrest for extortion, criminal threats, conspiracy to commit fraud, and witness intimidation. As the handcuffs clicked around her wrists, Loretta found her voice. This is ridiculous. I didn't do anything. She agreed to sign. It was voluntary. Was it? The detective gestured to the camera in the corner. We have the whole thing on tape. Your enforcer threatening her. Your demands. Your son's testimony. We have months of recordings from your own home. You're done, Loretta. Loretta's eyes found Amora. For the first time, there was no triumph in them. No contempt. Just shock, and something that might have been fear. You planned this, she whispered. All of it. Amora met her gaze steadily. You should have left my father alone. You should have left my son alone. You should have left me alone. As they led Loretta away, Solomon following in handcuffs, Amora felt her legs give way. She sank into a chair, her whole body shaking. Donnell stood nearby, uncertain. Amora, not now. She held up a hand. Just, not now. He nodded and stepped back. Ms. Victoria, the attorney, brought her a glass of water. You were very brave. Amora shook her head. I wasn't brave. I was terrified. Bravery isn't not being afraid, the attorney said gently. Bravery is being terrified and doing it anyway. The door opened again, and Vernon walked in. He moved easily now, no cane, no weakness. His eyes found Amora, and he crossed the room in 3 quick strides, pulling her into his arms. You did it, he murmured. You did it, baby girl. Amora clung to him, tears streaming down her face. But they were good tears. Relief tears. Freedom tears. Later, at the police station, Amora gave her full statement. Donnell gave his. The evidence was overwhelming. Recordings, texts, forensic analysis, witness testimony. Loretta Jenkins sat in an interrogation room, her lawyer on the way, her carefully constructed world crumbling around her. Preston, already in custody, would face additional charges. Solomon's parole was revoked. The 2 muscle men from the first meeting were picked up on outstanding warrants. The whole network, it turned out, was rotten. And Vernon's operation had exposed it all. That evening, Amora sat in her father's living room. Miles was asleep in the spare bedroom, worn out from a day of pancakes and cartoons and not understanding why Mommy was crying and laughing at the same time. Vernon brought her a cup of tea and sat across from her. What now? She asked. Now you rest. You heal. You figure out what comes next. I don't have any money. They took everything. Not everything. Vernon reached into his pocket and pulled out an envelope. Inside was a cashier's check. Amora stared at it. Dad, what is this? The money from your car. $8,000. I had Malcolm pull some strings and get it frozen before Loretta could touch it. It's yours. Amora's eyes filled with tears again. I don't know how to thank you. You don't have to. You're my daughter. That's enough. She looked at the check, then at her father. And Donnell. Vernon's expression hardened slightly. That's between you and him. He cooperated. He helped. But he also stood by while you suffered for months. That's not something you forgive overnight. I know. She tucked the check into her pocket. I don't know if I can forgive him at all. That's your choice. And whatever you decide, I'll support you. They sat in comfortable silence for a while. Then Amora spoke again. Dad? When you were in the army, in intelligence, did you ever do anything like this before? Vernon considered the question. Not exactly. This was personal. That changes things. Changes them how? He looked at her, and his eyes were soft. It means I had more to lose. And more to fight for. Amora reached across and took his hand. Thank you for fighting for me. Always, baby girl. Always. The weeks that followed were strange and disorienting. Amora moved out of the apartment she'd shared with Donnell into a small but clean rental that her father helped her secure. She went back to work, her boss having been informed of the forged documents and the extortion scheme. He was horrified and apologetic, offering her paid leave she didn't want to take. Donnell called. Texted. Showed up at her door once. She didn't answer. She wasn't ready. Maybe she never would be. The trial was months away, but the evidence was so strong that Loretta's lawyer was already talking plea deals. Preston had flipped on his sister, hoping for leniency. The family was tearing itself apart, and Amora watched from a distance, feeling nothing but exhaustion. One day, she took Miles to the park. It was a cold but sunny afternoon, and she watched him climb on the jungle gym, his snowsuit finally fitting properly. She'd bought him a new one with some of the money from the car. A woman sat down on the bench beside her. Amora Hayes. Amora turned. The woman was in her 40s, well-dressed, with kind eyes. Yes. I'm Denise. I'm a reporter for the Chronicle. I've been following the Jenkins case. Amora tensed. I don't want to talk to reporters. I understand. But I'm not here for a story. Not exactly. Denise opened her bag and pulled out a folder. I've been investigating Loretta Jenkins for 2 years. She's done this before. Threatened people. Taken their money. Used her brother's connections to intimidate them. But no one would ever come forward. They were too scared. She held out the folder. You're the first one who fought back. The first one who had proof. Because of you, other victims are coming forward. There are at least 6 families who lost everything to her. They're finally willing to talk. Amora stared at the folder, then at Denise. I didn't do it alone. My father, your father is remarkable. I'd like to talk to him too, if he'll agree. But you're the one who endured it. You're the one who held on. Amora looked at Miles, laughing as he slid down the slide. What do you want from me? Just your story. If you're willing to tell it. Not for the paper, I already have that. For the other victims. To show them they're not alone. To show them there's hope. Amora was quiet for a long moment. Then she nodded slowly. Okay. I'll talk to you. Denise smiled. Thank you. Whenever you're ready. She left her card and walked away. Amora watched her go, then looked back at Miles. Her son. Her freedom. Her future. It had been stolen from her, piece by people who thought they could get away with anything. But she had taken it back. With her father's help, with Donnell's reluctant cooperation, with her own stubborn refusal to break completely. She had survived. And now, maybe, she could help others survive too. That night, she called her father. Dad? That reporter came to see me today. Denise. Ah. She's good people. I've known her for years. She's the one who first tipped me off about Loretta's history, actually. Amora blinked. You knew her before? Let's just say we have mutual acquaintances. She's been waiting for someone to break that case open. I pointed her in your direction. Amora laughed, a real laugh, surprised and warm. You plan that too? I don't plan everything, Vernon said mildly. Just most things. Dad. Thank you. For everything. You're welcome, baby girl. Now get some sleep. You've got a whole life to live. She hung up, smiling. Outside her window, the city lights glittered against the night sky. Somewhere out there, Loretta Jenkins sat in a jail cell, her empire in ruins. Somewhere out there, Donnell was trying to figure out who he was without his mother's voice in his ear. Somewhere out there, other victims were gathering their courage to come forward. And here, in this small rental apartment, Amora Hayes was free. She went to check on Miles one last time before bed. He was sprawled across his little bed, one arm flung out, his face peaceful in sleep. "I promise you," she whispered, brushing the hair from his forehead. "I will never let anyone hurt you again. Never." He stirred slightly, then settled back into sleep. Amora turned off the light and closed the door. The nightmare was over. And tomorrow, the real work would begin. Providing a steady income stream that finally gave her the financial security she'd been denied for so long. Vernon visited every weekend. He and Miles had developed an unbreakable bond. The little boy adored his grandfather, and Vernon doted on him with the patience and joy of a man who had waited his whole life to be a grandfather. They built forts in the living room, went to the park, and had secret handshakes that made Miles giggle uncontrollably. Donnell kept his word. At first, his visits were awkward, supervised by Vernon or sometimes Amora herself. But over time, Miles came to love his father in a careful, guarded way that children have when they sense something complicated. Donnell never pushed, never complained, never missed a scheduled visit. He paid child support without being asked, and once, when Amora's car needed repairs, he showed up with a check that covered it completely. "I don't want anything for it," he said when she tried to object. "It's the least I can do. For everything." Amora took the check, but she didn't thank him. Not yet. Maybe not ever. But she didn't refuse it either. One Sunday afternoon, Vernon arrived with a folder under his arm. Amora was making lunch while Miles played with his toys in the living room. "What's that?" she asked, nodding at the folder. Vernon sat at the kitchen table, his expression thoughtful. "Something I've been working on. A proposal." Amora wiped her hands on a towel and sat across from him. "Okay. I'm listening. You remember Denise? The reporter? The one who interviewed me?" "Yes. She was very kind. She's been in touch with all the other victims. The ones who came forward after your case broke. There are 7 families now. 7. All destroyed by Loretta and her network in one way or another." Amora felt a familiar ache in her chest. "That's horrible." "It is. But here's the thing, they're all coming out of it now. They're getting their lives back. And Denise had an idea." He opened the folder. Inside were photographs, newspaper clippings, and notes. "She wants to start a foundation. A support network for victims of extortion and family-based financial abuse. She's got donors lined up, lawyers willing to volunteer, therapists who've offered pro bono services. She wants you to be the face of it." Amora stared at him. "Me? You. You survived. You fought back. You won. Your story gives people hope. But I'm not a lawyer. I'm not a therapist. I'm just. You're just someone who refused to break." Vernon's voice was gentle but firm. "That's exactly what they need. Someone who understands. Someone who's been through it and came out the other side." Amora looked at the photographs, strangers' faces, victims she'd never met, people whose lives had been shattered by people like Loretta Jenkins. "What would I have to do?" "Speak at events. Meet with victims. Tell your story. Help them navigate the system. Nothing formal, you'd keep your job, your life. Just be there. Be proof that it's possible to survive." Miles ran into the kitchen, clutching a toy car. "Grandpa! Come see my tower. It's really tall." "In a minute, buddy." Vernon ruffled his hair. "Grandpa's talking to Mommy." Miles looked at Amora, then back at Vernon, then ran off again. Amora watched him go, then turned back to her father. "Okay. I'll do it." Vernon smiled. "I knew you would." The foundation launched 3 months later. They called it Standing Ground, a name Amora had suggested because that's what she'd done. She'd stood her ground, even when it seemed impossible. The first speaking event was at a community center in a nearby city. The room was small, maybe 50 people, mostly women, some with children. Amora stood at the podium, her hands shaking slightly, and told her story. She told them about the Jackson Station platform, about her father's voice calling her name. She told them about the months of fear, the stolen paychecks, the threats against her son. She told them about the forged documents, the edited video, the cold terror of being trapped. And she told them about her father. About Vernon Hayes, the quiet man who'd served 20 years in Army intelligence, who'd built a team of old colleagues, who'd planned an operation that brought down an entire criminal network. When she finished, there was silence. Then a woman in the back row stood up. "My mother-in-law did the same thing to me," she said, her voice cracking. "Took my husband's paycheck, threatened to take my kids. I thought I was alone." Amora met her eyes. "You're not alone. None of you are." Afterward, a line of people waited to speak with her. Some just wanted to shake her hand. Others wanted to tell their own stories. One woman, young and pale, clutched Amora's arm and whispered, "How did you survive?" Amora thought about the question. How had she survived? "I had help," she said finally. "I had my father. But mostly, I just refused to give up. I refused to let them win." The woman nodded, tears in her eyes. "I don't have anyone." "Now you do." Amora pressed a card into her hand. "Call this number. It's the foundation. We'll help." That night, driving home, Amora felt something she hadn't felt in years. Purpose. 2 years later, Standing Ground had offices in 3 cities. Amora had quit her corporate job to run it full-time. Her salary was smaller, but her life was bigger, full of meaning, full of people who needed her. Miles was 5 now, a bright, curious boy who asked endless questions about everything. He knew his mommy helped people who were scared, and he was proud of her in the simple, absolute way of children. Vernon had officially retired, though he still consulted on security matters occasionally. He spent most of his time with Miles, teaching him to fish, to build things, to be kind and strong. Donnell had become a steady presence in Miles's life. He'd gone to therapy, worked through his issues with his mother, and slowly, painfully, begun to rebuild himself. He and Amora would never be together again, that door was closed forever, but they'd found a way to be civil, to co-parent, to put Miles first. Loretta Jenkins had served 18 months of her sentence before being released on parole. She lived in a small apartment in another state, alone and broken. Her son wouldn't speak to her. Her grandson would never know her. The money was gone, the friends were gone, the power was gone. She was just an old woman now, forgotten by everyone except the victims who still carried the scars of what she'd done. Preston remained in prison, his appeals denied. Solomon had been returned to custody for parole violation and was serving additional time for his role in the extortion scheme. One evening, Amora sat on her balcony, watching the sunset paint the sky in shades of orange and pink. Miles was inside, watching a movie with his grandfather. She could hear their laughter through the glass door. Her phone buzzed. A text from an unknown number. * Ms. Hayes, my name is Teresa. My sister was one of Loretta Jenkins's victims. She took her own life 2 years ago because she couldn't face the shame. I just wanted to thank you. Because of you, her children know the truth now. They know their mother wasn't weak. She was brave, just like you. Thank you. Amora read the message 3 times, tears streaming down her face. Then she typed a reply. I'm so sorry for your loss. Your sister was brave. They all are. If you ever need anything, the foundation is here. We're all here. She set the phone down and looked out at the sunset. 2.5 years ago, she'd been standing on a subway platform, holding her son, wearing a torn coat and cheap boots, with nothing but fear and exhaustion in her heart. Now she had this. A life. A purpose. A future. Her father stepped onto the balcony. Miles wants you. Something about a monster under the bed. Amora laughed. Again? We vanquished that monster last week. Apparently it's returned. With reinforcements. She stood and hugged him, quick and fierce. I love you, Dad. I love you too, baby girl. They walked inside together, into the warm light of home. The nightmare was over. And the dream was just beginning. The END digging in the dirt with his stick, occasionally running over to show them some new treasure, a pretty rock, a feather, a dandelion he'd picked just for Mommy. Amora watched him, a peaceful smile on her face. You know what the strangest thing is, Dad? Sometimes I forget. For whole hours at a time, I forget it ever happened. I'll be working, or cooking dinner, or reading Miles a story, and I'll realize I haven't thought about Loretta or those months in days. Maybe even a week. That's not strange, Vernon said. That's healing. I know. But part of me feels guilty, like I should remember. Like I should carry it with me, so I don't forget what I learned. Vernon considered this. You won't forget. Not really. But you don't need to carry it like a weight. Think of it more like a scar. It's part of you, it shaped you, but it doesn't hurt anymore. It's just proof that you survived something that should have broken you. Amora leaned her head on his shoulder. When did you get so wise? I've always been wise. You were just too busy rolling your eyes at me to notice. She laughed. It was true. As a teenager, she'd thought her father was impossibly old-fashioned, overly protective, completely out of touch. Now she knew he'd just been waiting for the right moment to show her who he really was. Miles came running back, clutching something in his small fist. Mommy! Mommy! Look what I found. He opened his hand. On his palm sat a perfect four-leaf clover, tiny and green and impossibly rare. Amora gasped. Miles! Do you know what that is? It's a lucky clover. Grandpa told me about them. He said if you find one, it means good luck forever. Vernon chuckled. I might have mentioned that once or twice. Amora took the clover carefully, as if it were made of glass. This is amazing, baby. Do you want to keep it? No, Mommy. I want you to have it. For good luck. You need it more than me. Her eyes filled with tears, happy tears, the kind that came easily now. She pulled Miles into a hug, holding him tight. Thank you, sweetheart. I'll keep it forever. Miles wriggled free after a moment, already bored with hugs, and ran off again in search of more adventures. Amora looked at the clover in her palm, then at her father. Maybe he's right, she said softly. Maybe our luck has finally turned. Vernon put his arm around her. It's not luck, baby girl. It's you. It's him. It's us. We made this. Together. They sat like that for a long time, watching Miles play in the spring sunshine. That evening, Amora put Miles to bed and sat down at her laptop. The foundation had sent her an email, a request from a woman in another state, someone who'd read about Standing Ground and wanted help. Her story was almost identical to Amora's: mother-in-law, threats, forged documents, stolen money. Amora read it twice, then began typing a response. Dear Maria, I know how you feel right now. I know the fear, the exhaustion, the feeling that there's no way out. I know because I lived it. For 2 months, I was trapped in the same nightmare you're in now. But I also know that there is a way out. Not because I'm special or brave, but because I had help. And now I want to be that help for you. Here's what we can do. She wrote for an hour, outlining resources, legal options, safety planning. When she finished, she read it over, made a few small changes, and hit send. Then she closed the laptop and looked at the four-leaf clover, now pressed carefully between the pages of a book on her nightstand. Lucky. Maybe it was luck. Maybe it was her father's skill. Maybe it was just her own stubborn refusal to quit. Whatever it was, she was grateful. The next morning, her phone rang early. She glanced at the screen, unknown number. For a moment, old fear flickered in her chest. But she pushed it down and answered. Hello. Amora Hayes. A woman's voice, hesitant, scared. Yes, this is Amora. My name is Maria. I got your email. I didn't know who else to call. I don't know what to do. They're going to take everything. They're going to take my kids. Amora sat up straighter, her voice softening. Tell me everything, Maria. Take your time. I'm listening. And she listened. Just as someone had once listened to her. Because that's what survival meant. Not just getting through it yourself, but being there for the next person, the next victim, the next soul trapped in the dark. That was the legacy of Loretta Jenkins. Not the fear she'd spread, not the pain she'd caused, but the community of survivors she'd created. The women who refused to be broken. The families who fought back and won. Amora Hayes was one of them. And she would spend the rest of her life making sure she wasn't the last. 3 years after that day on the Jackson Station platform, Amora stood in a large conference room in downtown Chicago. The room was filled with women, dozens of them, from all over the country. Some held babies. Some sat alone. Some clutched each other's hands. This was the first national conference of Standing Ground. 3 years of work, 3 years of building, 3 years of watching one small idea grow into something that had helped hundreds of women escape the same trap Amora had been caught in. At the podium, a woman was speaking. She was in her 50s, gray-haired, elegant, with the kind of presence that made you listen when she talked. "I was married for 30 years, she said. 30 years to a man I loved. And for 30 years, his mother controlled every aspect of our lives. Where we lived. How we raised our children. What we did with our money. When he died, I thought I'd finally be free. But she'd planned for that. She had documents. She had witnesses. She had lawyers. She took everything. The house, the savings, even my husband's pension." She paused, looking out at the audience. "I spent 5 years trying to fight her alone. 5 years watching her drain every resource I had. And then I found Standing Ground. They connected me with lawyers who worked pro bono. They found other women she'd done this to. They gave me proof that what she'd done was illegal. And last year, I won. I got my house back. I got my life back." The room erupted in applause. The woman waited for it to die down, then continued. "But I didn't come here to talk about my victory. I came here to talk about the woman who made it possible. The woman who started all of this because she refused to be broken. Amora Hayes, will you come up here?" Amora's heart lurched. She hadn't expected this. She looked around the room, saw hundreds of faces turn toward her, and felt her legs go weak. Then she saw her father in the back row, Miles on his lap, both of them beaming at her. She took a deep breath and walked to the podium. The woman hugged her, then stepped aside. Amora faced the crowd. "Hi," she said. Her voice wavered slightly. "I'm Amora. And I don't really know what to say. I'm not a speaker. I'm not a hero. I'm just someone who was lucky enough to have a father who knew how to fight." She looked at Vernon, who gave her a small nod of encouragement. "But standing here, looking at all of you, I realize something. I'm not lucky because of what happened to me. I'm lucky because I get to be here, with you, now. Because every single woman in this room has survived something that should have destroyed her. And you're still here. You're still fighting. You're still standing." She paused, gathering herself. "When I was in the middle of it, when I was handing over my last dollar, when I was afraid to close my eyes at night, I thought I was alone. I thought no one could understand what I was going through. But I wasn't alone. And neither are you. We're all here, together, proof that we can survive anything if we don't give up." The applause started slowly, then built into a roar. Amora stood there, tears streaming down her face, and for the first time in her life, she understood what her father had meant about purpose. This was it. This was why she'd survived. Not just to live, but to help others live too. Afterward, women lined up to meet her, to hug her, to thank her. Some just wanted to shake her hand. Others wanted to tell their stories. Amora listened to each one, holding hands, offering tissues, promising help. At the end of the day, exhausted but fulfilled, she found her father and son waiting by the door. Miles ran to her, wrapping his small arms around her legs. "Mommy, you were so good. Grandpa recorded it on his phone. Can we watch it at home?" She laughed, scooping him up. "Sure, sweetheart. We can watch it 100 times." Vernon walked beside her as they headed for the exit. "You did good, baby girl. Really good. Dad? Can I ask you something?" "Anything." "Do you ever think about what would have happened if you hadn't been at that subway station that day? If you hadn't seen me?" Vernon was quiet for a moment. "Every day," he admitted. "Every single day I think about it. And I thank God I was there." "Me too." She shifted Miles to her other hip. "Me too." They walked out into the Chicago evening, the city lights beginning to twinkle against the darkening sky. Somewhere out there, another woman was probably sitting in a cheap apartment, counting her last dollars, wondering if she'd ever be free. But tonight, in this moment, Amora was exactly where she belonged. With her son. With her father. With her purpose. Free. Finally, completely, forever free. Vernon leaned back in his chair, considering the question carefully. That depends on what you need, baby girl. Not what she wants. What do you need? Amora stared out the window, watching the city lights flicker in the darkness. I don't know. Part of me never wants to see her face again. Part of me wants to hear what she could possibly say after everything she did. Forgiveness isn't for her, Vernon said quietly. It's for you. If you go hoping she'll suddenly become a different person, you'll be disappointed. She's not capable of that. But if you go to close your own chapter, to look her in the eye one last time and walk away knowing you're free, that might be worth something. You think I should go? I think you should do whatever gives you peace. And if you do go, you're not going alone. I'll be right outside. Amora thought about it for 3 days. She talked to her therapist, a gentle woman who'd helped her process the trauma. She talked to Denise at the foundation. She even talked to Donnell during one of his visits with Miles. Do what's right for you, Donnell said. Not for her. Not for anyone else. You owe her nothing. In the end, she made her decision. She called Attorney Sargent and agreed to a meeting. Neutral location, a small conference room at the Foundation's office, neutral ground. Her attorney present. Vernon waiting in the next room. And a single condition, the meeting would be recorded, for Amora's protection. Sargent agreed. The day arrived grey and rainy, appropriate weather for confronting ghosts. Amora dressed carefully, a professional blouse, nice slacks, the clothes of a woman who had rebuilt her life. She looked in the mirror and saw someone strong, someone who had survived. She was ready. The Foundation office was quiet on Saturdays. Amora arrived early, setting up the recording equipment herself. Vernon sat in the adjacent office, the door slightly ajar, close enough to hear if anything went wrong. Her attorney, a young woman named Patel from the Foundation's legal team, reviewed the ground rules one last time. At exactly 10 a.m., Attorney Sargent arrived with Loretta Jenkins. Amora's first reaction was shock. The woman who walked through the door was a shadow of the one she remembered. Loretta Jenkins had aged a decade in a year. Her hair was gray and thin, her face lined, her eyes hollow. She wore a simple dress, nothing like the expensive clothes she'd once favored. She looked small, diminished, broken. For a moment, Amora felt something almost like pity. Then she remembered. The threats. The money. The fear. The assault on her father. The terror in her own son's eyes when strange men watched him at daycare. The pity died. Amora. Loretta's voice was quiet, subdued. Thank you for agreeing to see me. Don't thank me yet. Amora gestured to a chair. Sit down. The attorneys took their places. Sargent placed a recorder on the table. This meeting is being recorded with both parties' consent. Mrs. Jenkins has requested this meeting voluntarily. No statements made here can be used in any legal proceeding without mutual agreement. Is that understood? Both women nodded. Loretta folded her hands on the table, her eyes fixed on them. For a long moment, she said nothing. Then she looked up at Amora. I'm not here to make excuses, she began. I know there are no excuses for what I did. I've spent the last year in therapy, in prison, in solitude, and I've had a lot of time to think about the person I was. The person I became. She paused, swallowing hard. I was angry. Angry at the world, at my life, at everyone who had more than me. I raised Donnell to be afraid of me because fear was the only power I understood. When he married you, I saw everything you had, the condo, the education, the loving family, and I hated you for it. Not because of anything you did. Because you had what I didn't. Amora listened, her face expressionless. I convinced myself I was doing it for Donnell, for the family. But that was a lie. I did it for me. Because I wanted what you had. Because I thought if I could take it from you, it would fill the empty place inside me. Loretta's voice cracked. It didn't. It never does. Taking from others only makes the emptiness bigger. Amora said nothing. The silence stretched. I don't expect your forgiveness, Loretta continued. I know I don't deserve it. But I wanted you to know that I understand now. I understand what I did to you, to Donnell, to your father, to that little boy. I can never undo it. I can never give you back the months I stole from you. But I am sorry. Truly, deeply sorry. Tears slid down her lined cheeks. Amora studied her for a long moment. Then she spoke, her voice calm and steady. You took my money. You took my peace of mind. You took my sense of safety. You threatened my child. You had my father beaten. For 2 months, I lived in constant fear because of you. Loretta flinched but didn't look away. I didn't come here today for an apology, Amora continued. I came here because I needed to see you. To look you in the eye and know that you no longer have any power over me. That I survived. That I won. She leaned forward slightly. I don't forgive you. Maybe one day I will, but not today. Forgiveness isn't something you get just because you ask. It's something earned over time, through real change, through actions, not words. And you have a long way to go before you've earned anything from me. Loretta nodded, tears still falling. I understand. But I will tell you this. Amora's voice softened, just slightly. I hope you find a way to fill that empty place inside you. Not by taking from others, but by becoming someone worth being. I hope you get the help you need. I hope you find peace. She stood. This meeting is over. Loretta looked up, surprise flickering in her eyes. That's all? That's all. Amora gathered her things. You said what you came to say. I heard you. Now we go back to our lives. Mine is full and happy. I hope yours becomes something better than it was. But that's not my responsibility anymore. She walked to the door, then paused, looking back. Take care of yourself, Loretta. For whatever it's worth. Then she walked out, leaving the older woman sitting alone at the table, tears streaming down her face. Vernon met her in the hallway. You okay? Amora took a deep breath, then let it out slowly. I think so. I really think so. They walked out of the building together into the rain. Amora tilted her face up, letting the cool drops fall on her skin. Dad? Can we get lunch? I'm suddenly starving. Vernon laughed, pulling her into a hug. Anything you want, baby girl. Anything you want. They walked to a little cafe around the corner, ordered sandwiches and coffee, and talked about nothing important. Miles's latest adventure in preschool. Vernon's plans.